Hello, everyone. Welcome to our Healing and Recovery podcast. My name is Dolly, and I am here with my co host, Miss Michelle. And today we're going to talk about laundry list trait 6. It's all about over responsibility. And again, I'm your host, Dolly. I'm a licensed mental health professional working in California and the author of my new book, The Five Self Love Languages, is
Mm.
out now. So, yeah, welcome and let's get into it. Hi, Michelle.
Hi, Dolly. And hi, everyone listening. I'm Michelle Wellington. Happy to be here. A little bit about me. I am an emotional integration coach, flower essence practitioner, and longtime 12-step recovery person. And just really love talking about how we can overcome some of these lingering effects of the things that happened in our childhood. And that's what I'm all about because I've been doing that in my own life for a really long time. So I'm really happy to be here. And today we are focusing on trait 6. I'm going to start by uh, naming what the traits are, but before I do that, wanted to just give a really quick overview of what these traits are. So we have the laundry list, which is a set of traits that describes common characteristics of an adult child of an alcoholic or dysfunctional family. So somebody who experienced trauma in their childhood. Then we also have another way that these effects can be expressed, and that's called the other laundry list, which kind of describes it from the opposite perspective and sort of shows us how we can kind of act out and dominate and or abandon others the same way we were abandoned. So these traits can kind of go to the reverse. And then we have our flip side list, which is like our integrated expressed state after we have been doing some of this healing and trauma work for a while. So focusing on trait 6, laundry list. We have an overdeveloped sense of responsibility, and it is easier for us to be concerned with others rather than ourselves. This enables us not to look too closely at our own faults. Hmm. And then the integrated expression of this trait, the flip side, we do not use enabling as a way to avoid looking at our own shortcomings. And then how does this trait 6 also express itself in sort of the opposite direction where we become the experience that we had? Well, we are irresponsible and self-centered. Our inflated sense of self-worth and self-importance prevents us from seeing our deficiencies and shortcomings. And then the flip side, the integrated state, is through our in-depth inventory, we discover our true identity as capable, worthwhile people. By asking by asking to have our shortcomings removed, we are freed from the burden of inferiority and grandiosity.
Oh my
Yeah.
goodness.
So there's a
Yeah,
lot. You can kind of see the different angles there, but like
yeah.
let's zoom in on this laundry list trait, this first one,
Hmm.
the overdeveloped sense of responsibility. So what
Yeah.
does that even mean to have an overdeveloped sense of responsibility? Well, it means that we can constantly be putting other people's needs above our own,
Hmm.
taking on other people's problems, or feeling like it's your job to fix situations, fix in quotes,
Yeah.
or fix people, right?
Hmm.
What would you add to that?
Yeah, we have a overdeveloped sense of responsibility because roles are not clearly defined when we're growing up. We don't
Mhm.
have a clear sense of where do I belong in this family? What is my role in this family? Am I here to just manage my own self, or am I here to be a certain role to help protect, fix my family, my parents, my the chaos and drama? Am I responsible for it? If I'm
Mhm.
not responsible for it, who's responsible for it? And children are so self-centered. They truly believe that everything that's happening around them is because of them. that
Mm-hmm.
they have this magical power, children believe, to make certain things happen or to stop from the chaos. And if they tried hard enough, if I was responsible enough, if I was strong enough, smart enough, clever enough, I could fix my family. I
Mm-hmm.
could fix my mother's unhappiness, or the father's alcoholism, right? So this overdeveloped sense of responsibility comes from the pain
Mm-hmm.
and the enmeshed roles and the chaos and the confusion that dysfunctional families offer, where
Mm-hmm.
nobody knows what they're doing, nobody knows what they're supposed to do, but the child wants to fix, help, rescue, and assume a role for coping, for
Mm-hmm.
survival, for clarity, to know what to do. What do I do? Let me
Mm-hmm.
help fix my mother's sorrow.
Yeah, I was just gonna add that this one goes so deep.
Hmm.
This one is really deep because if you think about it, um, the right roles are for the adult to care for the child.
Yeah.
Somehow, in a family where there is trauma, that role gets reversed.
Hmm. Yeah.
Child is like, what do I need to do to regulate and like not allow for that caregiver to act out or ignore me? They start like that I read it in a recovery reader. It's like the current of energy is supposed to go from parent to child, but it
Hmm.
reverses
Yeah.
in trauma homes. So the child is now tending to the parent. And so becomes a survival skill. It's an actual survival skill. And that becomes easier than looking at your own flaws and your own mistakes or your own
Hmm.
painful feelings.
Yeah.
Becomes a way you can kind of just avoid and numb out, which is also really wild. We
Yeah.
can use it as a drug,
Yeah.
like being like helping all the time and fixing and having our attention outward to avoid what we're feeling in here, right?
Hmm. Yeah, because your own pain is so much that
Hmm.
you don't have the guts to even face your own pain. Because you
Hmm.
wouldn't know what to do with your own pain. Because you
Right.
wouldn't know how to channel it. So I'd rather just avoid my own pain, my own responsibility, and just step up and become parentified. Take care
Mhm.
of my parents and be that daughter that could rescue them and save them, right? So what happens is that becomes your identity. A child who's been stepping up to save the parent will become an adult who steps up to save wherever they can, even if
Mhm.
they're not required, because they cannot help it. This savior complex or this over responsibility muscle has developed so much that it has become their whole entire identity.
Yeah.
So they draw self worth and sense of identity from being able to rescue, help, fix, because that's what was given to them in childhood. In
Mhm.
childhood, they were given these circumstances that asked them to step up to the plate and
Mhm.
assume these. Nobody said it, nobody defined it, but because there was no clear definition, the person just assumed the job, the role and responsibility, because nobody else was controlling. So to establish predictability, to establish control, to make sense of things, children will step up and
Mhm.
become those adults that are used to controlling
Mhm.
other people, their
Mhm.
perception of them, the circumstance of the family, the outcome of the relationships. So it all becomes about control
Mhm.
in order to avoid facing their own pain.
Mhm. Yeah. And you like a couple of everyday examples of this. So you take on extra work at your job
Hmm.
because you feel obligated, even at the cost of your own well-being. Maybe you have a boss that depends on you to like show up and then like they end up taking a lot of the credit, but you feel responsible in some way for like taking care of them. Maybe that boss has a lot of qualities that that qualifying caregiver has for you that brings you into program or recovery of this kind. Or
Mhm.
with your family members, holiday season is coming up soon. You say yes a lot to your family members or friends requests, even when you're tired, you're exhausted, because you don't want to you feel selfish, or you feel guilty for taking that time for yourself. So these are kind of more like everyday examples of how this over responsibility can show up. And as Dolly said, these roots go really deep, that at some point that survival skill kicked in, and you became parentified. You felt like it was a matter of life or death to be fixing and taking care of other people, and that carries over into your adult life.
Right, yeah. Children who watch their parents suffer will take on the parents' pain to
Mhm,
help them to help them with their pain, with their
mhm,
problems, with their responsibility. If a
mhm,
child sees a mother suffering or losing control, the child will step up and be the parent and help mother gain control. And but in this whole process, the child forgets who they are. They
mhm,
lose their own sense of identity in this family responsibility. They get
mhm,
enmeshed with the roles and responsibilities of the parent. And when a child starts to think about a parent's life, they forget about their own life. They forget
mhm,
about their own identity, and they just get enmeshed and consumed by the parent's life. So
mhm, mhm,
this is where the overdevelopment of responsibility and rescuing and fixing comes from, because when there's no one large and in charge, the ACA will step up.
Yeah. Yeah. So talk to us about this, the flip side. So I mentioned that, it is, we do not use enabling. So that's a new word that we should talk about, enabling,
Mhm.
as a way to avoid looking at our own shortcomings. So tell me, what are shortcomings, and what is enabling for this integrated expression of this trait?
Right. So what happens when we heal this? We
Mhm,
don't focus so much on other people. We
mhm,
don't enable them, which means we don't do their job for them. We don't live their life for them. We don't solve their problems for them. We don't take on their emotions for them. We stay present to our own life, and we stay available but detached from other people's life and their problems. You
mhm,
stay in your own lane, you stay focused on your own work, but you are interdependent. You are
mhm,
not doing so much for another that they are becoming powerless and helpless. Because
yeah.
many times people will take over other people's lives and emotions in order to control the relationship. So,
Mhm,
for example, if I'm not able to love myself, I will control the relationship so much so that I can feel loved constantly, so that my drip of love or acceptance or validation keeps coming from there. So I will control and overmanage and be over responsible for the person or the relationship or the things we're going to do or the plans we should have, just so I can get my fix. So this
mhm,
habit has identity issue roots, but also it's a habit, it's a personality, and then it has reasons that are coping based and survival based, and has roots in fear. We are so
mhm,
scared of losing other people that we want to live their life, solve their problems, take on their emotions, just so we can will
mhm,
get that acceptance and validation, right? So how do we start to heal? Acknowledgement, we're talking about it, and then we start to separate what is my stuff, my responsibility, from other people's responsibility and their job. We have clear boundaries on this is my role and responsibility, this is other people's life, their emotion, their roles and responsibility, right?
mhm,
We don't manipulate them in order to get sucked into them. So stop using other people's lives as a distraction from your own pain and your own life. That's
Mm-hmm.
like an epidemic. People get distracted by celebrities. They want to feel responsible for their friends' lives or what their boyfriend is doing or not doing, just because they don't have to face their own issues and work hard on themselves and maybe fail or maybe realize they're not so great after all.
Mm-hmm.
People don't want to do the work because they don't want to see themselves, they don't want to face their own shortcomings. And that's what this trait is telling us, that you look at other people's problems because you don't want to solve your own problems. You don't want to accept that I have these weaknesses and I might have to work on these weaknesses, because that's the hardest thing, right? To change your own self, to change
Mm-hmm.
your own personality, your own false behavior that is dysfunctional, right? So you stop focusing on other people and you start focusing on your own self, and get ready to sit in discomfort of looking at your own dysfunction. Get ready to sit in discomfort so you can look at your own dysfunction with acceptance, with humility, with humanity, right? So start to face the present moment. That's only step number 1.
Mm. Yeah. Can I jump in here and add something? This is
Yes.
like it was fascinating watching you. It's like so much conviction, which is what you do need to bring to recovery work, you know?
Yeah.
We have a couple sayings like sometimes quickly, sometimes slowly, or I wish you a
Mhm.
slow recovery, or allow it to be gentle. And like some people need to go in kind of with a fierceness because a lot of these patterns have been so deeply ingrained. Um, and if you're listening to everything that Dolly said, it's like 100% true. And if you happen to just be like, well, I think I do that. And there's some really tender things underneath there. Like Dolly said, the roots are in identity and fear. And I would even go further down into be like our abandonment wounds and also our wound of inferiority, our shame. And so know that this like recovery work will grant you freedom, and you're going to need to get uncomfortable to finally do the thing that if you are expressed in this trait, being over responsible, that there is something that you're not looking at, which is yourself, which is your own pain, which is your own wounding. And of course, we found intelligent ways to avoid that. It was painful, but we have tools now. There's new strategies that you can pick up, and you get to do that in the process of recovery. And so
Yeah.
yeah, there's a lot of just like tenderness, pain, and like like if you think about an actual wound you have, it can feel painful as it heals,
Yeah.
you know?
Hmm.
Like as that tissue is healing, the skin is, growing over, it can hurt to the touch. But that doesn't mean that it's not healing.
Yeah.
So,
And
yeah,
as
yeah, go
And
ahead.
as you do heal, you're gonna start focusing on your own life and your, like Michelle is saying, your own wounding, your own pain, and you will not waste so much of your time, energy, resources manipulating other people to get whatever love, acceptance, whatever you want. So once you are aware of your patterns, then you start noticing your patterns and how they come out in the moment. How do they unfold? What brings out these behavioral patterns? So in my book I talk about self-attunement to your behavioral patterns. So you have to attune yourself and find those patterns with acceptance and awareness, but you have to know what thoughts come up, which environment am I in, what emotions does that lead to, what lesson, what meaning, what message comes through that has me reacting.
Hmm.
And you cannot get to know yourself at this deep level if you're still busy enabling other people living their life, being responsible for their emotions.
Mhm.
Once you know your behavioral patterns and you start to attune yourself to
Mhm.
your inner family, right? When you see a behavior on the outside, you start to go inward to see what is my inner child feeling? What is my inner teen feeling? How's my inner critic going crazy as I am being responsible? What happens when I take on responsibility when I was supposed to say no,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
So, attunement,
Mhm.
yourself, your inner family, your patterns.
Mm. Yeah. This part of the flip side, this like we don't avoid our shortcomings. Like we start to look at our own shortcomings. So it's like this is a word that is part of, 12-step recovery. And I really like, also another phrase that is a recovery phrase is like character defects. I don't personally like to use that
Yeah.
phrase. That comes more from like AA. But I like shortcomings because it literally gives you that visual of like missing the mark, right? Like missing the mark of your highest self. Like I fell short, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And with that sort of visual, it's like there's room to grow. There's room to
Yes,
move
exactly.
forward, right? Rather than you
Exactly.
being like, you're flawed, you
Mm-hmm.
have a defect. It's
You're
like,
flawed and you're
no, I
doomed.
don't.
Okay, bye.
Right. So I
No,
really
that's not
like
what
this.
we're saying.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I really like this phrase shortcoming. It's like, oh, I missed the mark and I can keep
Mm-hmm.
going, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's
Yeah.
always room to grow. And so, you know, once like it can be really painful to look at those shortcomings, like it can bring up the shame that was embedded in us as children, right? It's like,
Mm-hmm.
of course we're
Mm-hmm.
gonna do the most to like avoid it. But
Mm-hmm.
what I have also found in the process of recovery, and we haven't really talked about the step work in this fellowship, but like there's such an emphasis on that self-appraisal. And I like to call it like the graceful self-appraisal or the graceful inventory of
Mm-hmm.
actions, of behaviors, of
Mm-hmm.
patterns. And I think that is really connected to this flip side trait. The
Yeah.
more you're willing to slow down and look at mistakes, habits, things that happened that maybe caused you shame. You know, you do that in community, or you do it with a therapist, or you do it with a coach, or you do it with like a partner that you're kind of working the steps with. It releases the shame and it allows space for healing. And the more you can start looking at that stuff, the less scary it becomes, and the less you have to use
Yes.
focusing on other people to avoid that. So I just also wanted to say, we're going through these traits, and the step work, right? That sort of I like to call it that systematic, gentle trauma work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Looking at your history and looking at your past and seeing what contributed to all of this stuff. It becomes less scary. It becomes a thing you don't have to avoid because you're like, here, this is like what I did or who I was, and it doesn't
Yeah.
define me,
Right.
right?
Yeah. Yeah. You start to look at things as this is the environment I was planted in, and I am the product of my environment. But
Mhm.
now I am in charge. I'm
Yeah.
in charge of nurturing myself, taking care of myself, and then getting to know myself. And then I can grow and change whichever
Mhm.
direction I want to grow and change. Yes,
Mhm.
you're a product of your environment, but now your growth and development is in your own hands as an adult, right?
Mhm.
And like Michelle is saying, previous shame will come up because shame keeps us from acknowledging our pain, acknowledging our fears, acknowledging our shortcomings, and then acknowledging what we need to change.
Mhm.
Once we face what we need to change with radical acceptance, with
Mhm.
compassion, with gentleness and soothing to our inner family, that's
Mhm.
when change and growth happens. But if you reject your own shame, if you reject your own shortcomings, if you criticize yourself and say, "Oh, I'm just so weak," or I did this, or I do that. Yes, you did it, but you can do differently if you choose to do differently. And
Mhm.
to bring yourself to that place where you can choose the right response takes a lot of work. That's where the step work comes in. A choice doesn't change in a day. It takes years of prep work to get to a point where you can easily, or maybe even with difficulty, say no to the wrong thing,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
It takes practice, recovery work, a lot of nervous system work. We must always talk about body work that we need to do every single day. When you are in recovery, you must do body work. I tell this
Mm-hmm.
to all my patients, my clients. You have to do throat work to open up, to speak your truth. You have to do tapping to release the trauma from your that's stuck in your body, right?
Mm-hmm.
So shadow work, grief work, like we talked about abandonment wound, all of this goes collectively
Mm-hmm.
towards accepting your shortcomings and then with power of choice choosing which direction do I want to go. What does my recovery look like?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And this is a good point to transition into this other laundry list trait, how it expresses. So remember, we have our laundry list
Hmm.
traits, which really kind of focus on like the effects of like being like victimized in our childhood. But then as we get older, that victimization can switch to victimizing people. And we can have these ingrained survival traits and skills where we kind of become the abusers.
Yep.
Um, and so our other laundry list trait is, we're irresponsible and self-centered. Our inflated sense of self-worth and self-importance prevents us from seeing our deficiencies and shortcomings. And so there's a lot in this one. And again, like we have to remember like the fellowship that we're in that gives so much permission for gentleness
Hmm.
and compassion. So like you might be hearing that phrase and be like, we are irresponsible and self-centered, and actually feel shame reading that, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like our inflated sense of self-worth and of self-importance, it's like, oof, like
Hmm.
you might be feeling that like I'm bad trigger
Yeah.
inside of you. And
Hmm.
so what I'm here to do is kind of break this down and translate a little bit
Hmm.
about what this other laundry list trait. So we are irresponsible. So this phrase responsibility, like if you literally break it down into chunks, it's like response, your ability to respond like effectively, right?
Hmm.
And so what does that irresponsibility look like in the context of, ACA? It can show up as avoiding accountability.
Hmm.
Not that like this person out there just doing all these crazy things and just like dropping all of your whatever, but like an avoidance of like accountability, right? An unwillingness to engage with your own emotional and practical needs. So it's like in a way like self-abandoning too, right? Um,
Yeah.
and for adult children, taking responsibility might feel really overwhelming. It's like, okay, so if we look at that first trait, it's like, well, I'm being responsible. And then it can go in the other direction where it's like, I don't want to be responsible for anyone. I don't, I don't, I don't want to do that at all. You just go in the complete opposite direction, but then you're not even showing up for life. You're not
Hmm.
even showing up for your relationships. And so that's what that irresponsibility means. And so self-centeredness. So in terms of ACA, self-centeredness often develops as a way to protect yourself
Hmm.
from emotional overwhelm. So you're like, on the other side with the laundry list, like giving away everything, no boundaries at all,
Yeah.
fixing and helping everyone until you hit exhaustion. But
Hmm.
then in the other laundry list trait, it can go in the opposite direction where you're like not my problem.
Yeah.
I did that in childhood and like not in my adulthood, and like
Hmm.
I have all these walls. Like I feel control by
Hmm.
not doing what I had to do when I was a kid. So
Exactly.
for those who grew up feeling unseen or unvalued, focusing on yourself can be like a reaction to unmet needs and being abandoned and shamed.
Hmm.
And it
Yeah.
can feel empowering. You're like, I'm gonna get my needs met by walling myself off and not being
Mhm.
responsible for anyone.
Yeah.
And this behavior isn't necessarily about selfishness, but rather it's about attempting to find worth, control, safety. We've been talking a lot about control, and every time I hear the word control in the sense of ACA, I think about safety,
Mhm.
you know,
Yeah.
which is something we all long for as recovering adult children.
Yeah.
Safety.
Safety and
Yeah.
predictability and stability and control so that
Mhm.
we're not again just confused and chaotic, right? Because living in confusion and chaos is dysfunction, it's painful, and that's what leads to coping mechanisms and emotional suffering. But
Mhm.
when we've been burdened with over responsibility, or we've seen the consequences of immature irresponsible adults. So a lot of ACAs become overly responsible for themselves and self-centered because they're so scared, because they've watched the irresponsible parent, they've watched the immature parents all their life. So now they want nothing to do with that. They want to be completely opposite. They don't want that chaos, confusion, lack of stability. So we develop a structure, a methodical, walled up structure so that nobody can disturb us, so our foundation can stay strong, right?
Mm.
So that's one of the main reasons people become walled off, to protect themselves and to
Mm.
establish safety, stability, security. And they're scared that if I pull my walls down, I'm going to be taken advantage of. I'm going to be asked for things that I don't want to do, or people will get upset. A lot of times, emotional people are walled off because they don't want to handle the emotional chaos and instability of other people,
Mm.
right? So, a lot of times, they'll separate themselves from others and say, I'm better because I'm able to handle my emotions with more control. But in reality, they just have really rigid boundaries. They're not processing any emotion,
Mm.
but they put themselves on a pedestal, separating themselves from the ones who feel too much because they don't want that chaos and
Mm.
over responsibility of feeling other people's emotions and helping them handle it, or taking on that energy, right?
Mm.
So inferiority or grandiosity is just another way to separate yourself from other people. If you
Mhm.
think you're better than or you're less than, you're only doing this so you don't have to establish a relationship or face failure in a relationship or
Mhm.
face rejection in another relationship.
Mhm. Yeah.
That's why people put themselves on a pedestal or put someone else on a pedestal, because if there's a power differential, people can reject each other. But if I'm up here and you're down there, I'll reject you before you can reject me. Hence, I will protect myself.
Mm. So well said. And yeah, in this trait, there's a lot of like words thrown around like, irresponsible, self-centered, inflated sense of self-worth and self-importance. And like if you just go behind that, like if you see that as like this shield of protection, like even you were mentioning the grandiosity, which is
Hmm.
another way that people protect themselves. I'm better than you.
Yeah,
Or they protect
it's a
themselves by saying,
facade.
I'm less than you. So it
Hmm.
can kind of just like go either way. But like underneath that is tenderness. Underneath that is deep-seated feelings of inadequacy or shame,
Hmm.
you know,
Or
of
fear. Hmm.
yeah, fears, things that like really got deeply embedded in your dysfunctional family.
Yeah.
And so compensating and crafting this facade of superiority, self-importance, and I'm better than you. But really, you just have a scared inner child back there that needs
Hmm.
tending to. And
Yeah.
so it is this trait is really like the emotional armor trait, I like to say.
Hmm.
It's
Hmm.
like you picked up the in the toolbox, like emotional armor. I'm better than you. I don't care about anybody. I'm on my own. I'm super self-sufficient. But like that's not actually getting your deepest needs met either. And so yeah, there is a integrated expression of this trait, thankfully, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and that is through our in-depth inventory, which I mentioned. An inventory is a process. It could be a writing process, it could be a verbal process of looking at your behavior, looking at your history, of looking at yourself. So through our in-depth inventory, we discover our true identity as capable, worthwhile people by asking to have our shortcomings removed, and that is the spiritual aspect of this program.
Yeah.
By asking to have our shortcomings removed, we are freed from the burden of inferiority and grandiosity. Oh, it's like so beautiful. So
Mm-hmm.
Dolly, talk to us about this flip side of the other laundry list trait. Like tell us about true self and identity and inventory and what is possible.
Right? How do we heal? What is possible? So, healing is possible even if you've been walled off or you've been rejecting other people. Healing is definitely possible once you get ready to face life with compassion, to face life with acceptance, and accepting that everybody has shortcomings. There are patterns people want to change, but they cannot. There are patterns that you want to change that are going to take a long time to change, right? So once you identify where you are today, and then you start doing the work to get back home to your true self, to your truth, what matters to you, what are you looking for in life, what brings you happiness, peace and joy, stability, what do you crave the most, what does reparenting or parenting self looks like, right? So once you parent yourself to wholeness and joy, then you can begin to open yourself up to other people and take on a little bit more energetically. What
Mhm,
happens with trauma survivors is that we're not able to take on other people's energy and sit with it or handle it. We either can fix it or we can stay far away from it, right? So we learn to have a new relationship with other people's energy. We
mhm,
learn to just sit with their energy. We learn not to over meddle, overshare. We learn what staying in your lane looks like. We learn what showing up for other people looks like with boundaries,
mhm,
right? So acceptance with humility is truly the answer. Accepting that the only thing you can put on a pedestal is your higher power or God, that all human beings are about the same and they're all worthy, and then relationships are not to raise you. Relationships are just to be as a companion in this world. Nobody
mhm,
can save you, nobody can fix you. You cannot live someone else's life for you. Relationships don't get better just because you did too much or so much,
mhm,
right? So, sitting with acceptance of shortcomings of yourself and other human beings, and then being okay with it,
mhm,
truly being okay with without judgment. So
mhm,
this the flip side happens. Healing happens when you remove judgment from
mhm,
your thoughts, actions, feelings, choices. Judgment is what is separating you from your joy. Judgment is what is separating you from your true self, and judgment is what is keeping you from healthy whole relationships,
mhm.
because you're
Beautiful.
saying someone is either better or worse and there's an agenda. So the agenda just has to be not responsible for anybody. The agenda of relationships has to be redefined. The
Mhm,
agenda in relationships has to be, energetic exchange, exchange of love, of good time, right? Whenever there's an ulterior motive, that's when it becomes dysfunctional and unhealthy.
mhm, mhm. While you were talking, I was thinking about this other laundry list trait, this grandiosity or like, I'm needless. I don't need anybody, or like, why do you need me? Like, get away from me.
Mhm.
Like it's all about me, all of this, right? That there is such a tender vulnerability. And so I feel like the flip side of the other laundry list where you're finding your true self is you're connecting with the tender vulnerability of that inner child. And finally, and again, this is where we bring in the reparenting work, finally give that wounded inner child like exactly what it never got. And once you start practicing that vulnerability with yourself, it becomes easier to be vulnerable with others because that's essentially what's at the heart of this
Mhm.
trait,
Mhm.
like an unwillingness to be vulnerable again. And I say again because anybody who finds themselves in this fellowship or this level of healing work and recovering
Mhm.
work was victimized at some point. If you have other laundry list traits expressed, you were victimized, even though you're kind of in some survival victimizing patterns, right? And so
Yeah.
it's so important in finding your true self, um, to be vulnerable with yourself, to allow yourself to feel, right? To
Mhm.
embrace a healthy self-image based on your real strengths,
Mhm.
your real limitations, not the ones that people told you or your strengths or your weaknesses, or
Mhm.
you didn't do this or do this better, or you
Yeah.
can't do this or you should do that, right?
Yep.
But like, what is your true self-image, right?
Yep.
And you discover a real value, a
Yeah.
real self-worth, and move beyond needing to validate yourself through that superiority, that grandiosity, right?
Right.
Because it's
Yeah.
not it's not the actual thing. It has no weight, right?
Mhm.
And then with the self-centeredness, the really just focusing on yourself, it gets balanced into a healthy self-worth. So if you're doing these self-reflection practices, the inventory, it becomes less scary to look at your own mistakes or your own
Mhm.
shortcomings. You're like, oh, this is a
Mhm.
part of who I am. And all humans have issues, right?
Right.
Like
Yeah.
I'm just like part of a big group of people who are just like working on like works in progress, right?
Yeah.
It
Mhm.
no longer becomes something you have to hide, right?
Mhm. Yeah, exactly.
So it looks like, you can suddenly like be at work and receive constructive criticism without
Mhm.
feeling defensive and
Yeah.
needing to control the conversation. It could look like, starting to really show up for commitments or show up for your relationships with a genuine intention to contribute because
Yeah.
not gonna like lose yourself in that. Like you're not gonna get smothered. You're not,
That's
you have that healthy boundary. You
yeah,
could be
that's
part of a team at work and
mhm.
give it your all and not feel like I'm being used or having something taken away from me.
Mhm.
Everybody needs to
Mhm.
stay away. Like you get to participate in life and in
Exactly.
relationships. And like
Mhm.
that's what it's all about because at the heart of this recovery is like we've separated and disconnected.
Yeah.
Recovery work allows you to reconnect
With
with
your truth.
yourself and with humanity.
Mm.
So it's just such beautiful work. What would you add to that?
Yeah, understanding how to be in the world without the hangups of dysfunctional home, right?
Mhm.
Dysfunctional home, the biggest thing a dysfunctional family teaches the children is don't trust, don't speak, don't invite anybody inside you, and stay walled off. And how do you do that? By judging others. So when you stop judging yourself and others, like you're saying, and accept the flaws, accept that everyone is a work in progress, everyone is dealing with something, right?
Mhm.
Just that mature higher self. I think that's the biggest thing I learned in recovery is to think the perspective and take on the perspective of my higher self, to operate from the belief of the higher self. versus being blended in with an injured inner child or a
Mm,
grandiose inner critic. Because inner critic is based on shame, fear, fear of rejection. When you do the recovery work, you are able to face life on the flip side, even though you know rejection will come, you know people will, narcissists will come, all kinds of life storms will happen, but recovery gives you tools to invite life, allow life to happen, and then you learn to accept life on life's terms.
mm,
Accept life on life's terms. Let go of the immaturity of the dysfunctional or wounded, I should say, wounded inner child, right? Inner child wants everything to be perfect and for their pain to go away. What we have to do is to teach our inner child that the past is gone, you are safe now. So, to thaw your inner child and bring them into the present moment and give them the safety, security, stability, communication, and then open them up to the world is how you heal,
mm,
right? You
right.
recovery works helps you lay down the foundation so that you can be present to life and present to the world with all your gifts. So you're not hiding yourself, you're not minimizing yourself, you're not betraying yourself, you're not judging yourself, you're not hiding your vulnerability, but you're also not naive, right? That's another big thing that I've learned as I've done the healing work, is that you accept life on life's terms, knowing that there's flaws, shortcomings, bad people, bad situations, and but you have the trust of yourself that you will be able to carry on
Mm,
with recovery wisdom, with God that you have conscious contact with every day, right? That you will be able to self protect, speak your authentic truth, handle yourself with compassion, and then come out on the other side every single time.
mm,
And this belief comes from doing the work every single day. Belief is a muscle that you live, that you create. You believe in something every day. You practice your faith and your belief, and the muscle gets stronger to when you need your trust, self sitting with self, not self betraying. It's available to you. It's a tool that's available only with practice,
mm,
right?
mhm,
So, all of this leads to self leadership. All of this leads to where I become my own mentor and guide. And I have the recovery work in my hand and I keep walking the walk with love,
mm,
right? That's like my biggest, I would say, the fruit of my recovery journey
mhm,
is having the hope, experience hope, strength, right? Having that joy because I have hope.
mm. Yeah, I would say mine is learning to be vulnerable, you know, just through my own story, like I picked up tools that would provide me, relief from feeling vulnerable because, feeling vulnerable as a kid was very painful. And through this work, I get to be both vulnerable
Mhm.
and protected. You know,
Exactly. Oh, I
because
love
I
that.
put in
Such a good.
protections, or I have a relationship with, power greater than myself that I believe protects me, like whatever it is, but like I have both. Like, and that to me is the key to being able to be in relationships. I always say this. It's like I didn't come here to like do a bunch of work and like be in this bubble like by myself with my
Right.
higher power. Like I
Right.
came to like be in relationship to
Yeah.
engage. And when you have trauma, engaging doesn't feel safe.
Hmm.
So you pick up all these strategies, these survival skills, but like what you get in working towards these flip side traits is the hope, the potential
Hmm.
to pick up tools that allow you to engage and be in relationship in a way that doesn't feel painful.
Yeah. And you don't have to be perfect and you don't have to people please them,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm. Yeah,
That
or
feels
be
good.
like grandiose and be like, I don't need anyone. And then you're inadvertently attracting all the people who want to prove to you that they can be the one for you. And it's just a
Yeah.
whole mess, right?
Yeah.
So,
Isn't that something? You said such an important point. When our self-worth and self-esteem is low, we automatically tend to put everybody up on that pedestal of grandiosity. And guess who's coming to be put on that pedestal? Freaking narcissists.
yep,
Oh, they eat that
knocking
up,
at
the
your door.
grandiosity, they love that. And when your self-worth, self-esteem is low, you tend to put everybody on that pedestal. And most people feel uncomfortable there. That's why relationships with normal people don't work out when your self-esteem is so low, because it's icky to be put on a pedestal by another human being.
Mhm.
So normal, healthy people kind of walk away, but who loves to stay all up in that grandiose spot that you put them in?
Mhm.
Narcissists.
Mhm.
People who want to use you because you have low self-esteem, you feel like you have low worth,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
So that's the first thing. You've got to stop comparing and stop putting people on a pedestal, no matter how much money they have, what they do, blah, blah, blah. You've got to never put a man on a pedestal, never put another human being on a pedestal, no matter what, no matter if they're your parents, even. Only God is up on the pedestal and everybody else is on a level playing field. And that's how you enter relationships, from a place of worthiness. I'm worthy, you are worthy, and we're going to exchange energy and be in this relational space to see how it mutually benefits us as we reciprocate. These
Mm.
words are very important for trauma survivors because we tend to go into relationships where we don't feel worthy. We attract people who feel too worthy and will shit on us. And then we keep them on that pedestal and we keep trying to prove our worth and stay in that hamster wheel, right?
Mm.
So watch for transparency, reciprocity, right? Even exchange of energy. Watch for what, if certain things make you feel like they're taking advantage of you, are they? Are they? Ask the questions, do the talking. But
Mm.
that only comes when you've done the work enough to know you're worthy, enough to ask the right questions.
Mm.
Yeah, that's how I feel. Like when we are in that space of feeling unworthy, we allow people to just walk all over us,
Mm.
right?
Mm.
So that's where I feel like when you become whole, you will invite worthwhile people into your life because you know you're worthy.
Mhm. Yeah. Well, this was real juicy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Episode touched a lot of really good things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel so good about this. If our listeners are able to take away from this episode, I think the biggest thing I would say is acceptance of yourself and being
Mhm.
responsible for yourself. That's all.
Mhm.
That's your duty. That's it.
Mm. Yeah, yeah.
Any
And
final
yeah, I
how
would
you
just add
feeling?
like just know that like vulnerability is accessible to you again through the healing work. Like knowing kind of at the root of this trait is like we learn to stop being vulnerable by either taking care of a bunch of people or just disconnecting and not taking care of anybody or feeling so inferior to people or more superior. And like at the heart of it is like this disconnect from our own vulnerability, our own innocence, our own whatever it is, and that like the healing work allows you to reconnect with that. And so,
Yes, I love
yeah.
that. That's such
Mhm.
a beautiful completion point.
Yeah.
All right, everyone, then we will see you next time. I hope
Yep.
this is helpful to you. Stay in recovery, people. Bye.
Stay. Bye.